So my name is Dawn, and I'm here to talk about biopharmaceutical products, their indications and targets, and we're going to look at the past, the present, and the future of these molecules. So just a little disclaimer, I used to work for BPTC. We are officially now BPDG. On April 1st, our company was acquired by BDO USA, a professional service providing tax services and assurances. Going forward, we'll be known as BPTG now within life science practices. We'll be located out of Boston, not far from our home offices, original home offices in Woburn, and we're going to continue to offer CMC consulting services with the added benefit of tax and non-tax related life sciences. So what I want to talk today about a little bit about is the overview of our current Biotrac database as our data source, the current distribution of products by phase. We'll talk a little bit about product and indication classifications, and we'll provide a broad overview of marketed products historically and currently. And then we'll start looking at what the future might hold for what types of products we might be seeing in the future. So the Biotrac database, for the past 15 years, we've built and maintained this proprietary database. Essentially, this is all based on public information. We're tracking all kinds of recombinant biopharmaceutical products from preclinical to market, focused on the US and EU. We are actually building other biopharmaceutical markets, including two very hot areas right now, including gene therapy and modified cell therapy, as well as looking at regional products for regional markets. And we're also tracking the manufacturing capacity. So we're always tracking who's building new capacity, where these products are manufactured. We leverage this in conjunction with our forecast methodology to look at supply and demand for these products, as well as doing custom reports. So this is the current distribution of our recombinant pipeline at this time. And this is as of April 3rd. This data set includes markets with current marketing approval. What is not included in this data set that I'll talk about today, but is included in our Biotrac database, our biosimilars. We wanted to kind of keep this to a novel, what we're looking at, novel products, novel technologies, rather than biosimilars. And there's about 32 products that have been removed from the market since we started manufacturing biopharmaceuticals, which will be included in our data set but aren't actually shown here. And what you can easily see is that the majority of biopharmaceutical products are in the pipeline compared to those that have achieved market approval. And amongst all phases of development, mammalian-based products are actually the dominant product type. So to talk a little bit about the products and the indication classifications, we have a somewhat rigorous classification system for our products. We have six classes, antibody products, and these will include fragments, pieces, parts, conjugates, bispecifics, all of that kind of stuff. Blood proteins, cytokines, hormones, which will include insulin, and proteins, which include peptides. And we're also tracking products that may be conjugated either by pegylation or with drugs, as Juan had spoken about earlier. And for each product, we track a single indication. So this way we're not double counting things. We just kind of want to look at how things look. And for us, the indication for a marketed product is the product with the largest indication. And for a product that's in development, it's whichever indication is most advanced, i.e. it's closest to being approved. So we're looking at things like autoimmune diseases, which are immune system malfunctions. This could be psoriasis, this could be lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, blood disorders, where we're hemophilia, clotting issues, cancer, cardiovascular issues, including myocardial infarctions and cholesterol issues, endocrine and metabolic disorders, which would be infertility, type 2 diabetes, growth hormone issues. We have genetic disorders, the multi-polysaccharide, PKU, Gaucher's disease, a lot of these orphan indications. Infectious diseases, we're now developing recombinant products for, such as HIV, hepatitis, and anthrax. Neurological diseases with migraines, which we've had a couple of within the past year, and of course I'm sure most of you have heard about lots of monoclonal antibodies being developed for Parkinson's or Alzheimer's disease. We're also tracking ophthalmic disorders, macular degeneration being probably the largest group there. Orthopedic disorders such as gout or osteoporosis, renal disorders such as renal failure, and then we just kind of have a little catch-all we call other for some of the very small ones, dental dermatology, drug delivery, and respiratory. Oops. So if we look at the cumulative overview, this goes from 1982 to 2019. In 1982, Humulin was the first recombinant product that was approved. And we go all the way up to 2019, and we have some couple of highlights here, such as 1986 OKT3, which was the first monoclonal antibody product. And we also have Roferon and interferon A, which were the first cytokines that were produced recombinantly. So kind of looking at this, you can really very easily see that antibodies are the largest sector here, followed by hormones and enzymes. This didn't necessarily start out that way because you can see at the very beginning, antibodies didn't really start coming into their own probably till about 2000. It's a little hidden behind the hormones there. If we look at indications for marketed products, this gets a little bigger. We have a lot more indications to look at over the timeline. But autoimmune cancer essentially consists of 50% of all the marketed products for those two indications. Then we have the blood proteins or endocrinology and metabolic indications as well. And as you can see for the neurological, very down at the bottom, there's all of a sudden this little peak, and those represent the 3 migraine antibodies that have recently been approved. So originally we were going to talk about targets, but when we started going through the data set, what we really realized is we actually don't have a full data set to be able to look at. So the first thing we actually started looking at was defining targets as a product function. So if you're going to be developing a product, will you be developing a product that functions as a replacement product? Or are you going to be developing a product that functions as a modulator? So for product functions, which functions as a replacement or enhancement, this would be for the lysosomal storage disorders, which you're providing an enzyme which a patient may not necessarily have. Diabetes, providing insulin. Infertility, you're providing reproductive hormones, enhancing the hormones that may already be there. So for modulators, we can talk about products like Remicade, which blocks the TNF inflammation cascade for rheumatoid arthritis. And we can also talk about Avonex, which inhibits the inflammation causing MS flare-ups. So within those two areas, we're modulating the immune system. Interfering with the process, we can cause a blockade or in some cases causing activation. And if we look at the split of the products, all the marketed products that we have so far, we can see this is not quite 50-50, it's about 60-40, where it's modulation versus replace or enhance. So when we started then looking at historically, we kind of divvied this up into 4 decades-ish. So you have the 80s, which is the early biopharma, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and then what we would consider today being the last 3 years of products. You can definitely see in the first graph that antibodies have increased significantly. And what we also see is a decrease in the development of cytokines and hormones, and very, very marked decreases. In the lower right-hand graph, what we see are the other product types. These are blood proteins, enzymes, and regular proteins. And these actually have been, I was actually surprised, they're pretty consistent, 15 to 20% along the time period overall. So when we start looking at indications, things get even a little messier. But what we can see in this first this first area here, right up in here, is this is autoimmune and cancer indications. And those, as we mentioned before, have the highest amount of products. And what I found interesting is that for the years that autoimmune was high, cancer was low, or it decreased. And then it just kind of seems it flips the year after, which I was actually kind of surprised at seeing. And I don't know if that inverse wave there has any meaning, but it's something that we're going to look at a little closer. I'm not sure it has to do with what's trending or what's interesting, but it was pretty interesting. And what you can also see is that for other products, there has been a general decrease. So for endocrine and metabolics, there has been a steady decrease. With renal and neurological, there's been a definite decrease. And then with the other products, cardiovascular, blood, neurological, on the lower right-hand side, something interesting you'll see is the cardiovascular antibodies actually beginning to peak, as well as the neurologicals. So these are actually kind of new areas that we're beginning to actually understand what's going on in the disease process and might be able to produce biopharmaceuticals for these indications. So when we look at our distribution of product function, what we're calling a target for these marketed products, what we see is in the very beginning in the 80s, it was replace and enhance. But then once we got into the 90s, kind of when we started getting very familiar with antibodies and phage display was starting to become known around 2000, we definitely see we're looking much more at modulators than we are with replacement products. So if we look at our current landscape, and this is taking us back to the original slide, so what we're going to focus on now are products that are in the pre-approval stage, which are the BLA, MMAs, MAs, NDAs, and further up into the pipeline, and we'll kind of take a look at what kind of products and indications we have here. When we look at future products by product type, overwhelmingly, it's antibodies across the board. Antibodies, we've made these into a platform, so it's very easy to generate large numbers of antibodies to a variety of targets, many numbers of targets. One thing to note is in the BLA, MA, and NDA phase, there's only about 8 products. So adding one, subtracting one can cause pretty large fluctuations in that area. But for the products in phase 3, phase 2, and phase 1, it's pretty definitive that monoclonal antibodies do hold the market. When we look at indication, we actually see a similar process where we have autoimmune and cancer, which are the first 2 bars on the graph, holding the majority across the entire development phase. And you do see some the rest of them with less than 10% overall. So this is actually just an indication of how many potential targets there are in the immune system. When we had started looking at the actual molecular targets, there are, I think we're up to 320 some odd cluster designation factors, and there are antibodies targeting a lot of these, and we're trying to understand the etiology of these CD factors in the process of disease to modulate these systems. So if we look at future products by product function, whether we're replacing, enhancing, or if we're modulating, again, across the board, we're modulating. And this is probably, if we're going to overlay potentially maybe some graphs of antibodies, this is probably due to the fact that there are so many antibodies in our pipeline that this is actually swaying our pipeline, the way we're looking at the pipeline. So just in summary, historically, we've seen in product type-wise, we've seen a significant increase in MABs, and they currently dominate the marketed product area. And it looks like for the foreseeing 5 to 6 years, which we would expect phase 2 products to be coming on the market within 5 to 6 years, it's going to be monoclonal antibodies. For indications, cancer and autoimmune disorders, are the most popular and are the top indications, and it kind of looks like that this really will be a continuation of that trend. And then for product function, although replacement enhancement of products was the primary process in early biotech, we've actually now kind of transitioned to modulation, where we're actually modulating the immune system. Special thanks to Tom Crawford, who helped us put a bunch of this data together. But thank you.